and I went to Norpan, and after that I studied in yeshivot, different rabbinical institutions of higher learning.
Yes.
Over the years, and kept on coming across Jewish sources that seemed to indicate that the lost 10 tribes were to be found in western regions of the earth, in Western Europe.
Yes.
And related areas.
Yes.
And they've been familiar with this idea beforehand in Australia.
Oh, before you came to Israel, you had some information on that.
In my youth, I'd run across different writers.
Yes.
Who, or different literature from different various sources. That mentioned this idea. Also, my father was interested in it. My grandmother was interested in it. But I'd more or less put it aside.
Yes.
I become more interested, you could say, since technically I was born Jewish, I was more interested in deepening my awareness, my commitment and knowledge of Judaism. So I'd more or less dismissed this idea, or not so much dismissed it, but pushed it to one side as being irrelevant and unproven, but I kept coming across these sources that indicated there was something in it.
I see.
And this, and together with an ongoing interest in contemporary affairs and history, which seemed to tie in, with aspects of which seemed to tie in with what these sources said, led me to arouse the drive within me to try and to study the subject deeply, or at least sufficiently for my own purposes, to convince myself whether it was true or not true, one way or the other.
Yes.
Which I did, and I spent quite a long time studying it. Eventually I came to the conclusion there was something in it. And I kept on studying it, and how one thing led to another. Eventually I put out one book. Rabbi lent me the money to first print the tribes, the first edition of the tribes. And after that, by the time the tribes was printed, I already had enough material for other books and research notes, and I kept on researching and corresponding with people and deepening my knowledge of this subject. So consequently, these books were the result, and other books as well, some of which are out of print at the moment, and still more notes.
I see.
And articles and information in general.
And you came and spoke to us a couple of times. So anyway, he came.
These themes of the lost tribes.
Yes, the tribes in his history and
the eventual
reuniting.
Reuniting
of the groups.
What happened in the breach in Jeroboam in 900 and something BC.
Right. Yeah, the division of the division is very unique too, because it gives you a great perspective and understanding of the scriptures. Because when the northern tribes went out in about 700 BC, then through Assyria, they were, with all the research that you did, it was wonderful, because everyone kind of confuses the Babylonian with the first dispersion, and they forget. And so when you study the scriptures, you see that that went first, and then the Babylonian and went out. So his books are marvelous, and we really love him, and it's so good to see you in Jerusalem again.
So you've been around these parts before with these people here. You know that they exist, that there are people who are very interested in these things. And that there's some scholarship in Christian circles, but it's rather rough and ready. And a lot of people are not interested. There's only a very, very small interest by just a few people. But the people that are interested are very interested.
They're very interested and very interesting and very nice. It's always a great pleasure to meet people. It's invigorating. It's invigorating to meet people, other people who share this interest, who are interested in it, who appreciate what's been done, what we're doing.
Yes, well, this is a good research, and also it draws us into the scriptures again, which is always helpful to realize that the God of Abraham Isaac and Jacob are still doing business and still unfolding mysteries, and so it's a real pleasure to be able to have you here. Would you like to share a little bit about the other books that you have here? Yeah, yes. You've got the Tribes, which is your first one.
Maybe you'd like.
Yes. Yeah. Let me come over and I'll get the camera.
Tom Turner. represents the stick of Ezekiel. In Ezekiel 37, the prophet Ezekiel is commanded by the Almighty to take the stick of Judah, and in one hand, and the stick of Joseph. For Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and all of Israel, and all the house of Israel is the companions in the other hand. And you will take one stick and put one stick upon another, and you shall take the two sticks. You shall place one stick upon the other stick, and they shall be one stick in your hand.
Wow.
And they become one stick,
Yes.
and this represents the eventual reunion of Judah and Joseph, of Judah and the lost 10 tribes in the last days. And Ezekiel speaks of this most emphatically, and so do all the other prophets. And this is how Tom Turner gives us his understanding of how the stick could be, and it's very.
Yes. And what is your website?
My website is www.britam, one word, britam.org.
Britam.org. So it's a very simple website name, and you can have access to your books here.
An approximate map of the tribal distribution of the 12 tribes before they were exiled by the Assyrians.
Okay, that's in the Common Kingdom, or is that before the breach of Jeroboam?
No, this is after the breach of Jeroboam. No, including up from the time they entered the land till they were exiled.
Okay, so they all stayed in their tribal lands, pretty much according to those borders that Joshua set out for them, until they were all exiled.
Yes, that is correct.
Except for Dan, and Dan did a little jump from down here up to the north, didn't he?
And there were other movements, but approximately for our purposes, we can take the borders as given here. This second map shows us that as we explained within the book, the tribes, that the extent of Israelite extension before their exile actually covered a good portion of the Middle East. It included not only what is now known as the present state of Israel, included a portion of Egypt, a portion of Saudi Arabia, all of Syria, Lebanon, portion of Turkey. The tribe of Dan ruled over the island of Cyprus, and they reached up right up to the Euphrates River.
Okay, so they went to the Euphrates River, and is this is during the captivity of the Assyrians?
No,
here?
This is before the captivity of the Assyrians. The Israelites were to be found throughout this region.
Yes.
But there were other peoples mixed in with them.
I see.
They lived amongst other peoples, between other peoples,
I see.
alongside them.
So they were spilling over the borders even back before the Assyrian captivity.
Exactly.
And I've got a picture of the tribes under David and Solomon, and apparently during the heyday of the of the Israelite superpower, more or less, under Solomon, they extended up here to the Euphrates River.
Yes.
And down toward Egypt, the river of Egypt, which is north of the Nile.
In our understanding of scriptures, that not only in the time of David, but also before David, in the time of Saul, and even for a period in the time of the Judges, the Israelites were to be found within these regions of what we call, for want of a better term, the borders of Greater Israel.
Okay, so they were spilling over the borders.
Okay, that was up
yes.
until the time of the Assyrian exile.
Okay.
We have another map here. We have a map here showing how one portion of the exiles was taken from the land of Israel, taken by the Assyrians and taken up into Assyria and also into Media, where it went amongst the places into which Israelite exiles were taken, as mentioned, the cities of the Medes.
Yes.
So that is